Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you for participating today. We have a novel narrative to present to you. Let us commence. My name is Daniel, and I have been married to my wife Mabel for over a decade. One might assume that after such a lengthy union, we would have established an unassailable bond, yet, the reality is that I have witnessed our marriage gradually disintegrate, fragment by fragment, over the years. Mabel is a shrewd and ambitious woman, quietly deteriorating like a house decaying internally yet maintaining an outward appearance of integrity. She ascended in the corporate hierarchy and now has a senior position at one of the largest firms in the nation. I have always been proud of her, consistently supporting and encouraging her. However, as her profession advanced, our marriage began to diminish. Initially, it involved minor issues, reduced time spent together, abbreviated conversations, and the omission of previously significant moments. I reassured myself that it was merely a phase and that equilibrium would eventually be restored, but it never occurred. Instead, conditions deteriorated after Mabel and I initially married. Circumstances were dissimilar then. We conversed for hours about a myriad of topics, both significant and trivial. We enjoyed one another's company. We devised plans, and despite life stresses, we consistently returned to one another. However, it now seems we are only two individuals managing a household. Every discussion revolves around bills, groceries, or the division of domestic responsibilities. There is an absence of laughing. There are no profound discussions, only obligations that require attention. Initially, I attempted to overlook it. After all, every marriage encounters difficulties, correct? However, regardless of my efforts to restore the connection, it resembled colliding with an immovable barrier. I organized dating nights. She consistently had employment. I proposed a weekend excursion. She stated that she was too occupied. I attempted to surprise her with minor gestures, such as her preferred cuisine or modest gifts, in the hope that she would recognize my continued efforts. However, she scarcely acknowledged them, and when she did, she showed insufficient interest to respond to my attempts at intimacy. She consistently possessed a justification for rejecting me. She was fatigued. She experienced an arduous day and required an early awakening. It reached a juncture where I ceased inquiring, as the rationale seemed futile. Mabel had undergone a transformation. I married her when she was kind, warm, and engaged. Now, I feel like merely an inconspicuous piece of furniture in the house. Her career has become her sole focus, and I am just the individual she cohabits with, as if her ascent to success has rendered me irrelevant. It seemed as though she had beyond me. Nevertheless, I persisted, persuading myself that eventually she would see her actions and we would reconnect. I remained patient and continued to exert effort, even when I felt isolated in my endeavors. However, as time progressed, no improvements occurred. Indeed, the situation deteriorated, and if I mentioned her increasing distance, she would become defensive. At some juncture, I had to confront the truth. If she truly cared, wouldn't she at least attempt to make an effort, however minimal? However, no. Accepting a marriage of this nature is challenging. One evening, I resolved to sit down with my wife, Mabel, and pose some inquiries I had long contemplated, expecting for straightforward answers. A rationale for the deterioration of our relationship. I had no intention of initiating a conflict. I merely sought the truth, Mabel, I stated while gazing directly into her eyes. Have I ever caused you offense? She scarcely glanced away from her phone. No, she responded curtly, as if the question did not need her attention. I asked, have I ever abused you, which caused her to hesitate for half a second. She exhaled audibly. Daniel is not irritated, of course. What is the reason for your inquiry? I allowed the silence to linger between us for a moment. Ultimately, I posed the issue that had been tormenting me for months. Why do you wish to terminate this marriage? As soon as those words escaped my lips, it was as if I had turned a switch. Mabel's entire manner transformed instantaneously. What is your meaning? I wish to terminate this marriage. She barked, her voice ascending. Must I serve as your subordinate for you to feel secure in your masculinity? Her words shattered my heart, yet I remained unresponsive, merely observing as she disintegrated, hurling accusations at me. She did not respond to my inquiry. She was evading it. I ought to have been enraged, yet I was not. Instead, I felt fatigued. Unbeknownst to her, I had been documenting every word and every outburst. I had come equipped, for I instinctively recognized that this dialogue would devolve into something unpleasant, and so it did. After what seemed like an eternity, Mabel had exhausted her grievances. She simply stood, exhaled sharply, and exited the room, leaving me in silence. I did not pursue her, I merely remained seated, paralyzed, gazing at the vacant chair opposite me. The following morning, I awoke to quiet. Mabel uttered not a word to me. There were no greetings or casual conversation. I observed her navigate the house, her expression devoid of emotion as if I were invisible. She did not even acknowledge me while she prepared for work. This was not the first instance of her emotional detachment. However, this occasion was distinct. I merely observed that evening. Upon returning home, I was greeted by the sound of laughter. Mabel hosted guests from her office, as shown by their manner of conversation. This was not novel. She frequently invited business colleagues to her home, and as customary, I greeted them courteously when passing by before proceeding directly to the bedroom. After some time, I intended to retrieve an item from the hallway and withdraw to my personal area, at which point I overheard Mabel's voice. Radiant and jovial she remarked, accompanied by a grin, "Oh, him. He is merely my roommate." I momentarily became immobile. I believed I had misheard. Was she joking? The individuals surrounding her were also laughing. It was logical that I was merely a man occupying space in the residence of a prosperous woman. Neither a husband nor a partner, but a roommate. I felt uncomfortable as I stood there listening while they transitioned to another issue, disregarding the significance of her previous statement, which was far from trivial given her career development. I bore the financial responsibilities of the household, settled the bills, and ensured she had the liberty to pursue her aspirations without concern. Nevertheless, the instant she achieved success, I became inconspicuous. Mabel's lack of respect rendered our relationship void, prompting me to make a decisive choice. I resolved to cease my efforts to secure a position in her life. I would no more implore for the slightest recognition. That night, when Mabel slumbered, I concluded my endeavors. I lay awake, gazing at the ceiling, having devoted years to preserving this marriage, yet I was the sole participant in this endeavor. Tonight, I reached my definitive conclusion. I had completed my task. I rose silently and retrieved a suitcase from the closet, taking just essential items, clothing, my sketchbooks, and a few personal belongings, disregarding anything else while packing. I gazed at Mabel. She slumbered tranquilly. I waited till morning when the first light of day filtered through the curtains, then I seized my luggage, took one more glance around, and exited. There are no notes. Negative. Farewell. I had ceased to elucidate my position to an individual who had ceased to pay attention long ago. Mabel did not even acknowledge my absence upon awakening that morning, which did not astonish me. There was no communication, no calls, nothing, just like any other day. It was not until the evening, upon her return home, that she likely recognized my absence. Once she did, the calls began to arrive consecutively. My phone vibrated incessantly, her name repeatedly illuminating the screen. I refrained from responding. Instead, I composed a 10-word response. I no longer desire to continue as your roommate. I pressed send, and almost immediately, my phone vibrated again for another call. Was it a reaction of shock or fear? I am uncertain whether she ultimately comprehended what she had forfeited, regardless of her thoughts at the time. I remained indifferent, gazing at the screen momentarily before placing the phone face down on the table, devoid of any feeling. 1 week subsequent to my departure. I instructed my attorney to prepare the divorce documents and forward them to Mabel. Anticipating her reaction, I was yet unprepared by the intensity and rapidity of her response. Shortly after obtaining the documents, my phone inundated me with calls and messages initially. She inquired whether I was earnest, as if my departure from the house in the dead of night was not already an unequivocal indication. Thereafter, the messages transitioned to pleading, bargaining, and guilt-tripping. Upon my lack of response, the authentic Mabel manifested her anger, entitlement, and utter unwillingness to accept accountability. However, I recognized the true catalyst for her turmoil. It was not merely the prospect of losing me, but rather the financial implications. Mabel's earnings had always surpassed mine, a fact that had never troubled me. Yet, in the context of our divorce, her financial success became a liability, as the legal framework deemed her the higher earner, resulting in her obligation to provide me with alimony. She was now legally required to provide financial support to me following the divorce. Mabel was incensed and unwilling to concede. Consequently, she resorted to manipulation, attempting to distort the narrative to her advantage. She challenged the divorce, bringing it to court in an attempt to portray me as the antagonist. She stood before the judge, articulating every complaint she could conceive, claiming I was indolent, devoid of ambition, and had coerced her into caring for me. However, there was a significant flaw in her performance. She possessed no evidence. The distinction between us was her dependence on deception and emotions. However, I possessed the truth, and more crucially, I had evidence. When my attorney presented the recording, the entire courtroom fell silent. Mabel's own voice resonated throughout the room, angry, defensive, and unfiltered. Every word was available for the judge to discern. She acknowledged that I had never abused her and that I had never inflicted harm upon her. Yet, there she was, vociferously accusing me. The judge needed to say little. Anyone present could ascertain the truth for themselves. I did not wreck our marriage. It was her indifference, disdain, and manipulation that caused its demise. The final verdict was issued, concluding the matter. The judge awarded the divorce in my favor, followed by an unexpected development for Mabel, alimony, as her income exceeded mine. She was now legally obligated to compensate me. I observed the astonishment on her face, but what could she articulate? The law was unequivocal. I wish to clarify. I do not require her financial assistance. I have established my own life and work, and I am thriving. Nonetheless, I will accept the alimony payment without reluctance, not out of necessity, but as a reminder. A reminder that she confined me to a loveless marriage for years while disparaging me, a lesson that actions had repercussions. Certain life lessons entail a cost, and this particular one is hers to bear. Individuals frequently fail to recognize the value of their possessions until they are lost. It is astonishing how one can offer another their love, loyalty, and time, yet still be taken for granted. The most disheartening aspect is the initial inability to recognize this occurrence. It begins with minor instances of disrespect that you dismiss. Rationalizations you employ to maintain harmony until you eventually awaken to the realization that you are merely a specter in your own residence. This event has imparted significant knowledge to me, and I hope others can derive value from it as well. Love transcends mere verbal expressions. It encompasses respect and is demonstrated via acts that substantiate those words. If an individual professes love yet regards you as inconsequential, the significance of that love is rendered null. This is an undeniable reality. I now invite your thoughts on this topic. What actions would you have taken in my circumstances? Would you have persisted or opted to disengage as I did? Do you believe I made the correct decision? Please leave a comment below to share your thoughts. If you found this story engaging, kindly like, share, and subscribe. Rest certain, you will not wish to overlook this opportunity. The forthcoming developments in the narrative are now publicly available. Regardless of others' opinions or statements, I am certain that I made the correct choice for my peace of mind.